year, I made my first League of Legends video where I talked about whether the game was welcoming to new players or not. And looking back at the video now, besides the bad audio quality and subpar editing, it definitely left a lot to be desired, as I only played 2 of the 5 roles in the game and didn't really go into much detail about other things. So since a lot has changed in the past year, I decided to make an updated video where I go a little bit more into detail, but without making it a full guide video. Now you might say, how are you still a new player after playing the game for a year? Well, in that time, besides playing Azir and Garen to make videos, I rarely touched the game, and whenever I did, I almost always played Aram. And so for this video, I'm going to be choosing one champion for each role that I've never played before, and go into more detail about the champion I'm playing. Now before we get into that, I just want to point out some of the major changes that happened over the past year. In October of last year, they removed the blind pick mode and replaced it with quick play, in which you can select your role and champion before queuing up instead of having to fight over them with your teammates like you did with blind pick. And in my opinion, that was one of the best changes by Riot to casual players, so it gets a big thumbs up for me. And not too long after that, they put out a major update where they reworked and added new items while removing mythic items in an attempt to balance out the game. There was also some minor changes to the map like you see here in the mid and jungle lane alongside other small differences. They also removed the rune Lethal Tempo, which has had a pretty big impact on the champions that regularly use that rune. And I remember when Lethal Tempo was removed, Yone players were having a meltdown on Reddit as his win rate plummeted while he had other people telling them that they were just building wrong, which was pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie. Now there are other changes that happen alongside several new champions, but I'm not gonna go over all of them in this video to keep it more simple. The first role we're going to go over is support, as it's my most comfortable position. And there are different types of support that you can choose from. For example, champions like Lux and Xerath would be classified as mages, capable of doing a high amount of burst damage and having good CC, but also having a small health pool, making them a high risk, high reward pick. While others like Soraka and Yuumi being classified as enchanters, who focus on spellcasting to heal, shield, and buff their teammates. But for this video, I decided to go for Blitzcrank, who would be classified as a tank support, and you can probably guess what their attributes are based on that classification. For the rune I ran with him, I just went with whatever was the most popular build for him at the time, and didn't create my own custom rune just to get that full newbie experience. And for the items, I basically did the same thing and went for whatever the game recommended me to get. And I'm also going to do the same for the rest of the champions that I'm going to play. Now the main thing that attracted me to Blitzcrank was definitely his rock grab, where he fires his right hand to grab an enemy and pull them towards him. And I gotta say, I kind of sucked at it in the beginning. It took me quite a few misses to get the hang of this Q, but once I did, it was very fun to play. Oh, and also, when I leveled up, I chose whatever ability the game highlighted for me to upgrade, you know, for extra newbie points. His W gives him a huge movement speed increase that you can use to either engage or disengage based on the situation you're in. But be careful, when the duration is over, you get slowed for a short period of time afterwards, so keep that in mind. His E empowers his next basic attack to do extra damage and knock up enemies for 1 second, which is perfect to combo with your Q. And his R detonates a static field around you that destroys enemies' shields and damages them, while also silencing them for a short time. And if you don't know what silencing an enemy does in this game, it basically stops them from using abilities for the duration of the silence. Additionally, while his R is not on cooldown, enemies that you attack will be marked and take extra damage after a short delay. Also, his passive grants him a shield after dropping to low health, but the HP of the shield you get is based on how much mana you have. So don't go crazy wasting your mana like I did in the beginning. Now a very basic combo for Blitzcrank would be Q to grab the enemy, then hitting your E to knock them up, and then pressing your R for maximum damage. You can also use your W in the beginning of the combo to get closer to your enemies for an easier time to land your Q. Now with the rune that I chose came 2 summoner spells, and for support, these ones are usually most commonly used. But with Blitzcrank, it gave me Hex Flash, which is paired with your regular flash. And the main difference between the two is that the regular flash instantly teleports you a short distance in front of you, whereas with the hex flash, you channel for a short period of time before teleporting. Yeah, I gotta be honest, I didn't like this one. I understand that you can use it as an element of surprise, but I couldn't do much with it. So if you're a new player, I would suggest you leave this one out. Now, though I did have a pretty good time as a support after I got used to Blitzcrank, I will say that the role and champion select mechanic can screw over your games sometimes. Like in my first Blitzcrank match, where I got paired with Yumi for some fucking reason, and also other champions that don't usually play in the bot lane, like this Master Yi that kept leaving me to die, caused us to lose the lane, then proceeds to go to our Zed, annoy him, and then go AFK. No wonder League players constantly warn other people not to play this game. But all in all, support feels like a relatively simple position to play while being very impactful at the same time. Now we're going to move on to the next role that is also situated in the bottom lane, which is ADC. And my champion of choice here is going to be Caitlyn. So ADC, if you didn't know already, stands for attack, damage, carry. And your job here is basically killing minions, buying items, and not feeding the enemy team. Because in the early game, you're going to be the weakest one in the match. But as the game progresses, the pendulum will start swinging your way. And there's also different types of ADC champions that you can play. Some depend on attack speed, others depend on ability damage, and some that are a mixed bag. And Caitlyn is known as a lane bully, as she actually does quite well in the beginning compared to most bot laners, which is one of the main reasons why I went for her. She's also a very crit damage oriented champion, which is why you'll see that most of the items you'll get with her revolve around increasing critical hit chance and increased critical damage. When it comes to her kit, it's actually pretty straightforward. Your W will lay down a trap that if stepped on by an enemy will root and reveal that champion, while giving you both increased range and damage on that target. Her E shoots a net that slows down enemies while also propelling you backwards, and you also gain increased range and damage on that champion just like with your W. Her Q shoots a projectile that deals physical damage, but that damage is reduced for the subsequent targets hit after the first one. And her R is basically aimbot.
Taking aim. Immaculate.
Now her passive is probably the most important thing in her kit. Every 5th shot that Caitlyn hits does increased damage. And what I like to do is to charge up her passive with minions, and then when I have my empowered shot, I'll either play more aggressively and damage the enemies with it, or if I'm being pressured and can't engage, use it to secure a cannon kill, because money is important.
The time of man has come to an end.
Psych!
Honestly, the games that I had with Caitlyn were all over the place. In one game I would be doing great and having a great time, while in other games I just got bullied around. Like in this match here, where my opponent was this Yasuo. Like, this guy has the most annoying kit to deal with. Oh, you want to hit him with your auto attack? Well, too bad, he has a wind shield. Okay, his shield is down. Now can I hit him? Well, actually no, because his passive will give him another shield that will negate a lot of the damage. In fact, I can sum it all up with this clip here.
No hesitation. See much appreciated.
So if you're someone who's into scalable champions and don't mind being weak in the early game, then this role might just be the one for you. Now that we're done with the bot lane, I picked Ahri to be my champion of choice to play in the mid lane. And I'm not gonna lie, I did play Ahri before in a ROM, so I do have a little bit of experience with her. But since it wasn't in a real game, it's still gonna be a fresh experience. Ahri's classified as a burst champion that's capable of outputting some serious damage if played correctly. Her Q fires an orb that penetrates and damages enemies before returning to Ahri. But to get the most amount of damage, you want to make sure that your orb hits the enemy on its way back, as that will cause the orb to do true damage instead. And true damage basically ignores any form of damage mitigation, so it doesn't matter how much magic resistance the enemy has, it will always do max damage. Her E blows a kiss that damages and stuns enemies while also making them walk in your direction for its duration. And a quick tip that I would recommend is to save your E until you're certain that you're gonna hit it and not trying to hit unnecessary skill shots like I did early on. With her W, you gain a brief movement speed increase and gain 3 charges of Foxfires that will seek nearby enemies while prioritizing champions if in range. Oh, and her passive heals you after killing 9 minions or monsters, while healing for a greater amount after killing an enemy. Now, after playing Ahri for a few games, the most effective combo that I found was hitting your target with your E to charm them, followed by your Q for a quick burst of damage, then pressing your W while moving away from the target. And you want to make sure that you hit your Q as soon as you hit your opponents with your charm, to make sure you get the true damage before they regain control of their champion.
Oh wow, my dumb ass forgot to talk about her ultimate. Good job, Chris.
And I must say, after getting the hang of her kit and combos, Ahri was a blast to play. And besides the first game where I forgot to switch from the bot lane position, that surprisingly went pretty well, I enjoyed all the games I played using this champion, including the ones I lost in. Though I will say that there's more pressure on you here because not only are you expected to win your lane, but also help out any teammate that might be struggling if your jungler isn't doing a good job. And that brings us onto our next role. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop the school intro here to give you a very helpful tip. If you're a new League of Legends player, then you need to stay away from the jungler role. It is easily the most complex role in the game with a lot of variables to it. And even though I picked one of the easiest champions you can pick for this role, it still didn't make it any less challenging. Having to pay attention to a lot of different things, like making sure that you're clearing your jungle efficiently to get gold, buffs, and to upgrade your pet. Constantly be on the lookout for objectives to make sure that the enemy team isn't taking them, all while looking at the other lanes to make sure they're not losing. And what makes learning this role even harder is all the abuse that you get from your own teammates, like getting constantly pinged throughout the game to let you know how terrible of a job you're doing. It's very mentally draining. But if you still decide that this is the role that you want to try first, then you honestly deserve all the hateful messages that come your way. So with that, we have reached the final role in the game. And I just want to say, if you made it this far into the video, you're awesome. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. But without any further ass kissing, let's get into this lane and the champion I picked for it, Ness. Top lane is probably the most versatile out of all the other roles in the game, as you'll find all different types of champions that are able to play in this role effectively. But for this video, I'm gonna focus on the tank / melee aspect of this lane, and I must say the switch from ranged matchups to melee ones was a welcome change of pace. Also, a little disclaimer here, I refer to Ness as a tank in my recording, even though technically he is more of an off-tank bruiser. But since he can still be played as a tank, I'm gonna stick with calling him that here. Now, not every tank is built the same, with a champion like Sion having really good sustainability and health, while lacking in the damage output department, compared to Nasus, who's less tanky than the former, but has the capability of dishing out some serious pain to his opponents. His Q unleashes a powerful axe hit that damages enemies and grants you stacks that increase its future damage if you kill minions or champions with it. And as a Nasus player, this is your most important ability. And since Nasus is very weak until he gets his Q stacks to a respectable level, your best bet is to stay away from early engagements and focus on getting last hits on minions with your siphoning strike. His W applies a slow on enemies that also slows their attack speed. And based on your situation, you either want to use it to engage with an enemy or to disengage if you feel like you're losing the fight. Also, try to not make it obvious that you're going to use your W on your opponent by just running towards them in a straight line, and instead try to close the distance between you and your enemy before using it. Now, his E is probably one of my favorite things about him, because it makes the early game for Nasus a lot more tolerable since it lets you poke your opponent without needing to get close to them. And it's especially helpful when you go against a ranged champion like I did here against this Teemo, And when you mix it with this rune here, you can really chip away at their health without even needing to get close to them. Just keep the mana cost in mind though. His passive also gives you lifesteal that increases based on level, and besides increasing your sustainability in fights, it's also a great tool to use to recover from engagements since it triggers on minions too. And besides learning to play him safe in the early game and not be too aggressive, and a few weird matchups like this one here where I had a Vladimir and a Katarina go up against me for some reason, Ness was a pretty fun and unique champion to play. And seeing him go from getting bullied constantly in the early game to then becoming the bully was a really rewarding feeling.
Really? I forgot to talk about his ultimate too? Well, here's a funny video I found to make up for the inconvenience.
So many dreams swinging out of the blue, but let 'em come true.
In my first video, I said that League, while kinda difficult at first, was still accessible to new players. And this time around, my opinion hasn't really changed much. But I will say, if you come from a different genre of competitive games like I did, your best bet is to watch a few guide videos about whatever role and champion you want to play, since the change in games is going to be very drastic. And with that, we have reached the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.